Remember the energy crisis of 2022? When Russia invaded Ukraine, gas prices shot through the roof, and everyone was worried about how to heat their homes. Well, it looks like history is repeating itself. Europe is once again staring down the barrel of an energy crisis, and this time the fuse has been lit in the Middle East. Let's rewind a bit. After the Ukraine war started, Europe made a huge push to wean itself off Russian gas. On the surface, it worked. The EU drastically cut its reliance on Russian energy. But here's the catch. They didn't become energy independent. Instead, they just swapped one dependency for another. Europe turned to new partners, primarily the United States for liquefied natural gas, or LNG, and Norway for pipeline gas. It seemed like a solid plan at the time, a way to stand up to Russia without freezing in the dark. But this new arrangement has its own set of very serious problems. The biggest issue is the reliance on LNG. Think of it like this. Pipeline gas is a direct, stable connection, like a dedicated internet line. LNG, on the other hand, is like using public Wi-Fi. It's shipped on massive tankers all over the world, which means Europe is now competing in a global market. When demand spikes somewhere else, or a supply chain gets disrupted, prices everywhere go wild. And the recent conflict involving Iran has put a massive spotlight on one of the most critical choke points in the world, the Strait of Hormuz. A huge chunk of the world's LNG passes through this narrow waterway. If it were to be blocked, even for a short time, the ripple effect on global energy markets would be catastrophic. It's a logistical nightmare waiting to happen. In Europe, with its newfound thirst for LNG, would be right in the eye of the storm. Prices would skyrocket, and supplies would dwindle almost overnight. This vulnerability isn't just theoretical. It's a clear and present danger to Europe's economic stability. Now, let's talk about the United States. The U.S. stepped in as Europe's LNG savior, but this help came with a hefty price tag. Washington has been very clever, using its position as a key supplier to lock the EU into long-term, expensive purchase agreements. Essentially, America used its economic leverage to its own advantage, leaving Europe with little choice but to pay up. It highlights a fundamental weakness in Europe's position: a lack of negotiating power and a reactive rather than proactive energy strategy. They were desperate, and they paid the price for that desperation. What about Norway? They're now the EU's single largest gas supplier, a reliable neighbor with a direct pipeline. That sounds great, right? The problem is Norway is already pumping gas at or near its maximum capacity. There's simply not much more they can do to increase supply in a crisis. Asking them to drill for more also creates a huge conflict with the EU's own ambitious green energy goals. Brussels wants to lead the world in climate policy, but at the same time, it's begging its neighbor to extract more fossil fuels. You can see the contradiction. This tension between short-term energy needs and long-term climate targets is tearing the EU apart from the inside. And that brings us to the internal divisions within the European Union itself. When it comes to energy policy, the 27 member states are rarely on the same page. There are fierce debates raging right now. Some countries want to suspend or weaken the emissions trading system, the EU's main tool for pricing carbon pollution, to ease the burden on consumers and industries. Others argue that this would be a massive step backward for their climate commitments. It's a classic battle between immediate economic pain and long-term environmental responsibility. There's also the ongoing debate about the Green Deal. While everyone agrees on the goal of a sustainable future, the path to get there is fraught with disagreement. How fast should the transition be? Who pays for it? How do you protect vulnerable households and industries during the shift? These aren't easy questions, and the lack of a unified answer is paralyzing the EU. While leaders talk about emergency measures like windfall taxes on energy companies and price caps for consumers, these are just short-term fixes. They're like putting a bandage on a deep wound. They might stop the bleeding for a little while, but they don't address the underlying injury. What Europe is missing is a coherent, long-term vision for true energy security. They are constantly reacting to crises, instead of building a resilient system that can withstand them. So, what would a real solution look like? For a fascinating case study, we can look to China. China is often seen as a rival, but their energy strategy is something worth studying. While Europe has been busy shuffling its fossil fuel suppliers, China has been going on a different approach: massive, state-led electrification. China has poured enormous resources into building out its electric vehicle infrastructure, its high-speed rail network, and its renewable energy capacity, especially solar and wind. Their strategy is simple but brilliant. By electrifying everything from transport to industry, they reduce their direct dependence on the volatile global markets for oil and gas. Of course, they still need to generate that electricity, and a lot of it still comes from coal. But the key difference is that the source of electricity can be diversified over time. You can build more solar farms, wind turbines, or nuclear power plants. You have options. When you're dependent on oil for your cars and gas for your heating, you're stuck. You have to buy it from whoever is selling it at whatever price they demand. China's model shows that true energy security isn't about finding a friendlier country to buy oil and gas from. It's about fundamentally changing how your economy is powered. It's about strategic long-term investments that break the addiction to fossil fuels altogether. Europe, with its technological prowess and economic might, is more than capable of doing this. But it requires political will, and most importantly, unity. The current crisis sparked by the conflict in the Middle East is another wake-up call for Europe. The continent is caught in a trap of its own making, bouncing from one dependency to another, all while its internal divisions prevent any real progress. The reactive policies of price caps and emergency taxes won't solve the fundamental problem. Without a unified long-term strategy focused on building a truly independent and resilient energy system, like the one China is pursuing, Europe will be doomed to repeat this cycle of crisis after crisis. The question is, will this wake-up call finally be the one they answer? Thanks for watching. If you found this analysis insightful, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive. See you next time.